Oh, hello there. Yes, well, it's another day. Hooray for that. I'm glad it's not yesterday, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow, inevitably. Anyway, today, yes, today we're just going to once again talk about grifters, because perusing the Twitter sphere as I was yesterday, I was struck by, well, quite how much of a singular view they all have, in ways that they cannot possibly believe this stuff, but because of the very tight constraints of the British media landscape, and to a lesser extent other media landscapes, have to conform. And it's intriguing when things don't go exactly right, should we say. We'll come on to that at the end. Some of these righty, griftery types are just daft. People that haven't really finished any form of a real education and don't have a concept base. I mean, Carl Benjamin is probably the prime example of this. Yesterday he posted this up, which is having Mediterranean summers would be overheating, according to this fellow. Yes, scoffing at the idea that we might well have heating of the UK islands by 5% in the future, because after all, everybody would want it to be just like the Mediterranean. Now, if any of you can't see why that might be an issue, you need to do some more research. And, you know, I would suggest that Carl spends a bit more time not sitting in a leather armchair, but actually, you know, trying to read something just for a change, because it wouldn't be good, Carl. Yes. Anyway, moving on from that, of course, we have other people, and it's debatable with some of them quite how sensible or just plain liars they are. I mean, you get Darren Grimes, who I don't believe is very much further advanced than Carl Benjamin is, although he will more obviously take money to hold an opinion. But we have Ollie London, for example, who goes along with that kind of Russell Brand school of Christianity that suggests that, you know, maybe there are certain commandments he doesn't mind breaking. We've got the inevitable story coming from the States of the migrant caravan just in time for the election. And of course, Ollie is very, very heavily invested in being pro-Israel and pro-Trump and anti-trans. I mean, he does post up an awful lot of laughable stuff about the way that people do weird things and look weird. Yeah, make of that what you will, but at least I guess it pays in some way for the famous author that is him. Yes, moving on, we get, I mean, just really odd stuff from certain of them. There's Tommy Robinson, who undoubtedly is a very skilled operator, and I'm sure the shekels are rolling in for him. The spons and other euphemisms for money. But we get this, he's put up yesterday, dismantle UNRWA. Well, I wonder why that is, because the woman reporting, Honest Reporting, has put up, why do so many young Palestinians turn to terrorism? It starts with education. UNRWA textbooks and Hamas TV glorify violence, pushing kids towards martyrdom, in inverted commas. Hamas summer camps turn children into terror prep. Whatever that means. This is grooming, not education. Yes, which sounds really dreadful until you actually think to yourself that maybe that's not the reason why the Palestinians are a bit hacked off. Could it be another reason other than a UN agency that is pushing that idea to them? And apparently not. Apparently, no, the Palestinians can't actually make up their own mind about anything. They are, after all, not very sensible, not like other people in the region, as we well know. And of course, the rest of the grifters have to buy into this nonsense. We get Kelly J. Keane, we will come back to her in a little bit. The UN should be defunded and disbanded. They are misogynistic anti-Semites, she says. Yes, I'm not really quite sure why exactly the UN has suddenly become misogynistic and anti-Semitic over the last few years. Presumably it's Hamas propaganda, or is it UN propaganda, or is it UN Hamas propaganda, or could it be another reason that Kelly just has to buy into this stuff because it's her bread and butter? She doesn't live merely by t-shirts alone, largely by t-shirts alone, but not entirely, and after all, we wouldn't want that funding to dry out, would we? Yes, probably in terms of the very much should know better, but hey, it pays, is Brendan O'Neill. So he put this up, which I had to, you know, metaphorically spit my cornflakes out at. The left loves to celebrate the Battle of Cable Street, blissfully unaware that if something similar were to happen today, they'd be on side of the Jew haters, says Brendan O'Neill. Yes, a man who's never written anything original in his life. And it really is an astounding level of chutzpah, one might say, to actually come out with that, because of course, most people on the left aren't actually, anti-Semitic or racist in any way, which can't be said of others like certain other people I have mentioned here. And yet he has the audacity, knowing full well how farcical that is, to state that. Astounding. And of course, it pays, doesn't it? I mean, Brendan O'Neill is always there with the rest of the Spike crew. They will say anything because the money from the US will roll in. Again, some favourites. We get, of course, Matt Goodwin, who has his own particular vote reform agenda, and it's very much that very narrow slither of the kind of Tufton Street style Liz Truss viewpoint. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard him come out with something that doesn't exactly fall into that very, very narrow band of what we might loosely call thinking. So here he is welcoming his new bestie, James Esses. Come on to him in just a second. Our schools are ideologically captured. Yeah, it means things I don't like, right? Okay, so it gets applied to someone like me. So magically, because I don't agree with him and his mate's viewpoint, I've become ideologically captured. Not him, you understand, because nobody that buys into all of this guff is ideologically captured. It's just the rest of us. Yes, and all this stuff about indoctrination in primary schools, which is another way of saying that teachers are putting forward government policy in a reasonably liberal way, which is ideologically capture. Yeah. Not too sure about that. And of course, inevitably we get James Esses, a man who, is forever going to sit on the sidelines telling me what I've done wrong when he doesn't do it himself, because when he has in the past tried to work with children, it hasn't quite worked out for him. But now, of course, it does pay a great deal to stare at the web each day and find things to pretend to be cross about, like me, for example, and what I do. Doesn't do it himself. But it is intriguing when this stuff goes wrong, because a couple of days ago there was the James Whale show, who would normally be quite happy with Kelly J. Keane, aka Posey Parker, being on, but unfortunately she got booted off the show, a bit like those lefties do on there, because reality suddenly butted in. And this is the dreadful thing with that kind of reformosphere, GB News, Talk TV, and The Spectator, The Telegraph, and Spiked, and the rest of them, because occasionally just real reality bites in, and suddenly things go wrong. Right? So here she was pontificating about how dreadful trans people are, and James Whale has a trans mate who kicked her off her show. It's quite intriguing to watch, and of course I think she's still smarting from that. It's a bit like Tommy Robinson. Now Tommy Robinson will undoubtedly come back later on this month for his shindig in London. I'm sure there's no way that he won't turn up for that. Yes, but right, okay, he will run into these problems as well. I mean, he can sidestep it neatly, but realistically, the whole "I'm not a racist and loads of my friends are black" is great until we actually do find himself with, for example, somebody who's willing to fund him a great deal, who actually is a practicing Muslim, in which case we have to go through somersaults. You think about the Reform Party with their new bestie Muslim donor. Now, they have to go through a whole series of hoops to try to pretend to you that there are good Muslims and bad Muslims. How do we know who's who? Well, the ones we don't know that don't get put up in front of the camera and haven't bought shares in the company are the good ones, and the other ones who are mysteriously photographed, looking all Asian in places like Bradford, are the bad ones. Yes, reality bites in suddenly, and we suddenly also, you will notice on a broader level, have to have this whole thing about, black members of the Conservative Party or brown members of the Conservative Party who are fine, and, Rishi Sunak's fine because, he's Rishi Sunak, and Priti Patel is fine because she's Priti Patel, and, various Muslims that aren't baronesses who have left the party recently are also fine, even though they're Muslims. And we have to pretend these things because that very narrow view has to be maintained. But reality, unfortunately, does bite in occasionally, as we've seen with James Whale. Oh dear, it's a friend of his, somebody he actually knows. And all of the research, there was some recent stuff around trans, suggests that when you actually meet people and find out about them, you suddenly discover that, gosh, they are human too. Probably type O blood. Yeah, might well support the same football team as you. You never know. probably got a box set just like you, and you could have a chat about it. But of course, it doesn't really sow the politics of division, as Brendan O'Neill undoubtedly won't tell us anything about anything. Yes. Now, if you want to find out more about this stuff, it's worthwhile sort of thinking about those wider things that were going on about a decade ago. If you look at the kind of ideas of people like Steve Bannon, who is still a major player and manipulator of this kind of thing in terms of the US election, because a lot of this money that funds these people comes from the US, and that's why so many of them have recently decided to discover Christianity, because that's what the evangelicals quite like. Yeah, looking at you, Carl Benjamin, I don't believe you've yet to go to church, but I'm sure you'll pretend that you are. Yes, I'm not saying that Russell Brand and Ollie London aren't dedicated Christians. I wouldn't dream of doing that. It just strikes me as slightly odd that if you're going to try to persuade people that you're not a sexual predator, that you'd actually say, oh no, I can't be, I'm a Christian. Maybe that's just me being cynical. Anyway, yeah, it's worthwhile. There's a link down below. You can read some stuff about Steve Bannon from several years ago. He very much pushes this idea of lying in this kind of very, very broad way. His viewpoint was, generically speaking, that it isn't the left that the enemy, it's the media, and you need to tightly constrain the media, and then you can just pummel the left day and night with just utter tosh, which oddly brings me back to all of the people I just mentioned. Yes, still, I would say that, wouldn't I, being ideologically captured. I think I should be banned, just like the United Nations, because the only reason I've got bad ideas in my head is UNRWA or something, or maybe it was my teachers, or I don't know. I do get confused. It's not a very coherent worldview, and it's certainly not one that realistically most of these people actually believe. But hey, it does pay. Yeah. Anyway, George Soros is watching. I still haven't got that check, mate. Anyway, do have a lovely this day, and I'll see you next day. Enjoy.